All right, let's go. 2012, Dalibor from the Czech Republic. Good luck, Dalibor. And we have another Sicilian. And we have faced virtually no open Sicilians. This is a plague on humanity. Everybody's going knight c3 now. It's crazy. And we've already faced this move like 3 or 4 times. But hey, this is a realistic cross-section of what people play nowadays. Opening fashions change. I feel like even like 2-3 years ago, open Sicilian was, you know, everybody was playing it, and the people who weren't were playing the Alapin. Now people are going for all sorts of knight c3 variations. We're going to respond with a move that I talked about previously, rather than going knight c6. And the downside of knight c6 is that it allows this incredibly tricky sideline, bishop b5. We've already faced this sideline. I've gotten into trouble against it. And around that time, I talked about the immediate g6, which is very uncommon, but it sidesteps a lot of annoying lines. If white is a Grand Prix attack player, then it doesn't really matter what you play. You can play knight c6 or g6. Our opponent is a Grand Prix attack player, which is knight c3 followed by f4. The Grand Prix attack is one of the most dangerous systems against the Sicilian. I haven't refreshed my own theory in a long time, so this is going to be really fun. Let's see if we can avoid getting checkmated. First things first, let's fianchetto our bishop. And usually white plays knight f3. And in this position, we have several different setups. Essentially, we can start by playing d6, or we can start with a more conventional knight to c6. Let's play more conventionally with knight c6. And bishop c4 is the old school move. The new school move is bishop to b5. This is a more positional way of playing the Grand Prix attack. Bishop c4 is the sort of old school method where you're aiming directly at f7. And you can watch my previous videos for more of a background on the Grand Prix attack, because this is a higher level game. I'm going to skip straight to the sort of juice and talk about the moves themselves. Afterward, we'll do a little bit more theoretical investigating. Okay, so as far as I know, the most popular setup, and this was popularized many decades ago, is what was taught to me as the Bortnyk setup. And that is where you go e6, and then you put the knight on e7. It's essentially like fianchetto, knight on e7, knight on c6, and you can do it with white as well. This is a setup, this is a system, not necessarily a specific setup against a particular opening. e6, as far as I remember, there's this very dangerous gambit line where white responds with d4. So there's a lot of theory associated with the move e6. And because I haven't refreshed my knowledge in a long time, I'm inclined to play a slightly more modest move. Maybe we can start with d6, and then we can either play e6, or we can play a line that I introduced a couple of speedrun games ago where we bring our knight actually out to h6. This is also an interesting line against the Grand Prix attack. Let me think about what we want to do here. So e6, I don't really want to play, but we can. We can start with d6 and then play e6. That's totally possible. Let's do that. Let's start with d6. And now that we have opened up our bishop, one thing that we don't want to do here is play bishop g4. This is a terrible move that walks right into this very well-known tactic. Bishop takes f7 check, followed by knight g5. So definitely not bishop g4. We can play knight f6, but it was taught to me a very long time ago that you want to avoid bringing your knight out to f6 in the Grand Prix attack and in the closed Sicilian. I'll talk a little bit more about that after the game. I think e6 is a much safer option, and it's an option that makes it more difficult for white to jumpstart his kingside attack. So let's go e6. Knight h6 maybe is a move here, but with the bishop already out on c4. There's also, by the way, the move knight a5. I've seen this move played sometimes, knight a5, in order to kick the bishop away from this diagonal. So it should make logical sense that you would want to do that, because f7 is our weakest pawn. But let's go e6. Let's play more conventionally in this game. I'm definitely out-theoried. Okay, d4. This is getting a little disturbing, because d4 here I'm not too familiar with. So basically I'm on my own, and this is where I might get crushed if I do. Okay, but we're going to try to use general opening principles to figure out our way out of this opening. Okay, so the idea of d4 is to blast open the center. And as far as I remember, after c takes d4, white responds with knight to b5. This is a very dangerous line, and we could get in trouble here. After c d4, white plays knight b5, And then white is exerting pressure on d6, but the main idea is that if we respond with a move like a6, white takes the pawn on d4. Okay, and once the d file is opened, the d6 pawn is quite a bit weaker. It's easier to attack. Now, I don't think we have much of a choice here. We have to take this pawn. Maybe we could also take it with the knight, but I don't really see a reason to give up our well-developed knight. I think we should start with c takes d4, and now we should invest a little bit of time. So, one thing that I really don't want to do is play a6, because what is white's next move likely to be? Well, likely it's going to be knight takes d4 anyway, so I think a6 is, I wouldn't say a waste of time entirely, but I would prefer to invest the tempo that we have into a developing move. And there's only one logical developing move. The reason we played e6 is in order to pave the way for knight g to e7, and I think that that's what we should do. Let's go knight g e7. Obviously, our opponent's still in theory, so I don't like facing prep that's this extensive. Bishop b3, okay. I understand why he did this, though. The point of bishop b3 is to take the sting out of the move d5, which we were sort of threatening. Now d5 can be met with e5. Of course, the bishop is no longer hanging. And I don't want to play d5, e5, because that creates big dark square holes, both in the center and on the king side. I don't love d5. It's a move that we would play if we were desperate. I think that we can essentially continue developing. So I don't see a compelling reason that we shouldn't castle kingside. I mean, again, we could play a6, but I don't really see the reason to do that. Yeah, I think we should just castle. And let's see how white responds. And this is very extensive preparation by our opponent. So big kudos. Okay, so now we have a position that I know a little bit better, because this is essentially an open Sicilian type structure. You can compare this to an accelerated dragon. The biggest difference is that here our knight is on e7. Here we have a pawn on e6, and both of those things don't occur that often in the accelerated. But by and large, in terms of the structure in the center and the fact that d4 has been played, we have a more similar type of position to the open Sicilian. Now, how are we going to proceed? Okay, well, first of all, we have the option to trade knights, which could be good, could be bad. It's hard to say. So we could trade and then bring the other knight out to c6. Very typical idea in a lot of different Sicilian structures. That's one option. Another option is to basically play it more slowly, but I'm worried that white will play f5. I'm really worried about this move f5, which could really cause problems on our king side. So there is queen b6. There is queen b6, but then white plays bishop e3, and our queen really looks dumb on b6. Another move that we could turn to is knight to a5. Maybe it's a good time to play knight a5 and get rid of this bishop in order to take the sting out of the move f5, which otherwise could be really, really, really scary. So I actually kind of like the look of knight a5. Yeah, let's try knight a5. And hopefully this will finally take our opponent out of theory. What I like about knight a5 is it's not a very committal move. So we can chill on a5 as long as we need to. And then at the right moment, we could take the bishop on b3. Obviously, like bishop a4 is a super awkward move. And that bishop could be targeted with a6, b5. So I'm not worried that white's going to keep the bishop. I'm not really worried about knight b5. That would be a really bad move because of queen b6 check. It would send the knight back to d4, where we could pick it off with the move e5. So I'm anticipating a developing move like bishop e3. And then we can breathe a little bit easier, because I know I won't get checkmated. No, Alan, Philip, queen b6 and e5 would not have worked, because there was this move, knight d4 to f5. Classic trick. I'll show that after the game. I'll write it down, actually. Okay, so what is going to be our kind of system of development? Well, when I look at this position, the bishop on c8 really needs to be deployed. And I think the best spot to deploy it is to b7, right? I mean, we could go bishop to d7, but then our pawn on d6 gets even weaker. And I feel like if we could bring our bishop to b7, at least we're exerting some pressure on white's center. So here, I would not rush with knight takes b3, because we could play this move whenever we want to. And of course, knight takes b3 creates a positional concession. It opens up the a file, so white will be able to develop some pressure on our queen side. So I think that we should go on with b6 and prepare to complete our development. c4, okay. So c4, our opponent starts playing this very positionally. but he's really extending himself pretty far in the center and on the queen side. This pawn could end up as a weakness. So we could play bishop b7 here. That would be the standard move. Another move that's on my radar is bishop to a6. I mean, if he put a pawn on c4, we might as well try to attack it with bishop a6. And we also put the knight on a5, so it would really justify the placement of our pieces. Bishop b7 I like because he can't play bishop c2 to defend the pawn. c4 will hang. So bishop b7, probably he's going to bring the queen up to d3. And then we could, for example, play rook c8. You know, we could play this more normally. But bishop a6 looks spicy. I really want to grab... Whoa. Okay, now our opponent has started to just pre-move. If this is still preparation, I would be absolutely shocked. Okay, let me think about this. This is a dangerous move. I forgot that f5 is a thing now that we moved our bishop away from c8. So what do we do here? We could grab the pawn on c4. We could definitely grab this pawn. That would attack the bishop, so white would have to respond to that. And if white would take our knight, then we would take white's bishop. We would be attacking the rook on f1. And once the rook moved, we could play something like e5 in order to close down the center and go after white's f5 pawn. So I don't see a compelling reason that we can't take on c4. F takes e6 would blunder the bishop on e3 with a fork. That doesn't seem dangerous. I'm going to call white's bluff. Oh, maybe bishop g5, actually. Wait a second. Bishop g5 might be annoying because that threatens pawn f6. Wait. Bishop g5 is a problem there. So let's think about this. Takes bishop g5. We could play h6 there, but then there's knight c6. No, this is bad. So maybe we should play the immediate e5. Maybe we should play the immediate e5. But then there's still bishop g5. Amazing. Okay, bishop takes c4, same problem. I just have to think about this for a little while. Okay, let's go e5. Let's go e5 and try to kick the knight out of d4. If the knight moves back, then I'll be really happy because then we can just take on f5. And of course, our king side is compromised, but it's not that easy for white to checkmate us here. With the bishop sitting on g7 and our pieces clustered around the center, I think we'll be fine. Knight b5. Okay, g takes f5 maybe. I don't want to take this knight and open up the diagonal for white's bishop. We can do that whenever we want to. So g takes f5, knight takes d6 is chaotic. But chaotic is good. We want chaotic here. Okay, let's play gf. Let's play gf for now. Because otherwise, you know, that pawn on f5 is a huge problem for us. And we're down to 6 minutes. Our opponent with over 15 minutes left. This is incredible. Very, very deep knowledge of this opening by white. Yeah, I don't know exactly what we're going to do if he takes on d6. This is just a very hard position to wrap our heads around, and don't feel like it's easy for me to wrap my head around it. It's just chaotic. So basically, in such positions, the first person to blunder loses. We're just going to try to avoid blundering and play logical moves. Yeah, finally, our opponent is out of prep, which is good. I mean, we're almost made it here, but that's okay. We'll survive. We will survive. Cue the Gloria Gaynor song. Okay, so what are we expecting here? Well, there's many ways for white to play. In the Grand Prix attack, traditionally, the way that you're recommended to meet g takes f5 is by trying to stick the queen on h5. So from that perspective, knight g5 may seem terrifying, but it wasn't. I don't think it was. Knight takes d6. All right, so what I like here is the move f4. I think that we should try to dry up the king side as much as possible because that's going to buy us a little bit of time that we could use to kind of untangle and coordinate our pieces a little bit better. So to me, f4 is a bit of a no-brainer because we hit the bishop, we create a little bit of a defensive, you know, bulwark on the king side that'll make it harder for white to infiltrate. And we buy ourselves a tempo. And white was obviously threatening in this position to play e takes f5. That is a pawn that we did not want to give up because that's a pawn which protects our king. So let's start with f4. And after the bishop moves away, we have to decide how to address the problem of this knight on d6, which is right in my grill. It's pissing me off. This knight is pissing me off. I want to address this knight. Now, we have two fundamental ways that we can try to get rid of this knight. We could try to trade it, or we could try to hit it with our pieces. And if we want to hit it with our pieces, the best way, I think, to do that is to try to get a rook to d8, because the queen alone is not exerting sufficient pressure. So after bishop f2, which I'm expecting, we could consider a move like queen to c7 in order to get the rook to d8. Okay, that's a reasonable move. It also puts more pressure on the c4 pawn, yeah. The downside of playing queen c7 is that the knight could return to b5 with tempo and hit the queen. But then we've accomplished our aim, and the queen could tuck itself away on, let's say, b7 maybe. And then we could bring our rook to d8 anyway and start getting our pieces into the game. Another thing I would point out, a move that I really would like to play at some point is knight e7 to g6, just as a way to solidify the e5 pawn and to bring a little bit more beef to the king side. But I don't want to play this move when the knight is still sitting on d6. And the reason why is I don't want to give away the outpost on f5 for white's knight. That is a very nasty outpost in most positions, this one included. So knight g6 is, I'm making a mental note to myself to make that move a little bit later when the smoke clears. But right now, we're going to keep our knight on e7 to protect the f5 square and to protect the d5 square against, a move like queen to d5 and stuff like that. By the way, if after bishop f2, we wanted to trade the knight on d6, we could do that with this retreating move, knight a5 to b7, which is not a move that I would really discount easily. Knight b7 is a good positional move. We're getting rid of our opponent's strongest piece. In the event of the trade, our bishop moves back to b7 and puts pressure on e4. I like that. After knight to b7, white could decline the trade by dropping his knight back to b5. Then our knight on b7 is a little bit awkward, but maybe we could bring it around to c5. So that's another option that we could explore. A lot of you are asking about knight g5 here. I'm skeptical about knight g5 because I don't see what it does. After knight g5, I feel like we could even just play h6. And in that position, maybe you're scared of queen h5, but I think we could just take the knight on g5. The big problem for white is that he doesn't have the services of his bishop. If there was no pawn on e4, then the bishop could move back to c2 and exert serious pressure on h7. I feel like the queen and the knight alone just aren't fast enough. Also, we've taken the rook largely out of commission by building up this pawn chain. So knight g5, we might face, but I'm not too scared of it. And I'm scared of most things, so I don't think this is going to work. Yeah, of course, after h6, white could play knight takes f7, and then we would play rook takes f7, knight takes f7. We might even snap the queens off the board, and then we would recapture the knight on f7. And we would have, what would we have? We would have two pieces for the rook, and our minor pieces are quite well placed. Like, our pieces on a5 and a6 are doing a job, right? They're attacking c4, so I'm fine with an endgame here. I'm fine with the queens getting off the board. Our pieces are not poorly placed. Well, because if white ever plays c5, then we could take on b3. Remember that. Right? That's why we put our knight on a5, to really take the sting out of a move like c5. He disconnected? I don't think so. I think our opponent's just thinking. There's a lot to think about here. There's a lot to think about here for white. I would play bishop f2 pretty quickly. Knight e5. I saw this move. I knew that this existed. I wasn't taking it very seriously. Maybe I should have. So let's try to deconstruct this move. What on earth is happening here? What on earth is happening here? So two pieces are hanging. That's the way I see it. There's the bishop on e3 and there's the knight on e5. Either of them can be captured. We could also take on b3, but forget about that for now. My intuition, and probably yours is the same, tells me to take on e5 because that's the problem piece. But let's actually try to calculate. If we instead take on e3, I would imagine that white's idea is to play knight takes f7. Okay. Knight takes f7. What if we just move our queen there? What's the big whoop? I guess the big whoop is that white plays c5 and opens up a line of fire toward our king. And if we take on b3, then white takes back with a queen and is threatening all sorts of shenanigans. Okay, let's think about this a little bit more. Fe, knight takes f7. We could play rook takes f7. Rook takes f7. And in that position, might be able to throw in the move e2. Okay, I need to think about this carefully. Because I think I've understood his idea after bishop takes e5. which I think is just to play bishop takes f4. But that's not too scary. Bishop takes c5. Another thing to remember is that if white delivers a check on g4, how should we deal with that check? Well, we shouldn't bring our king into the corner because then it could get checkmated potentially with knight takes f7. I think that bishop e5, queen g4, the beauty of this knight on e7 is that it could block any check with knight to g6. So I'm going to play this move largely on the basis of intuition, but I calculated f takes e3 just enough to understand that the resulting position is extremely chaotic and hard to evaluate. Generally, you want to avoid such positions if you have a choice. Right? Sometimes you don't have a choice, and sometimes you're on the losing side, and if you're on the losing side, that's exactly what you want. Right? You want to create chaos. Here, it's a little bit easier to assess the position. Our king is pretty safe. Bishop takes f4, I think, is the best move. So first of all, we can trade queens. If we want to, we could play queen takes d6 here, okay? Then white would have to take, otherwise he's 2 minors down. Bishop d6, bishop d6. But obviously, that resulting position is not over. White has 2 pawns for the piece. Our pieces are kind of discombobulated. I think that we are winning after rook f8. I think technically that position is probably going to be a win. But I'd like to find something better if at all possible. The alternative, I think, is to take on f4. The rook recaptures, and we play a move like knight to g6 to start getting our pieces to better squares. I'm apprehensive, though, about leaving the queens on the board, especially given our time situation. So from the perspective of playing like a Russian schoolboy, queen takes d6 makes sense. From the perspective of trying to be as accurate as possible, I think probably it'll end up that bishop takes f4 is the best move. But, again, I'm trying to give you a realistic portrayal of what I actually would play. And what I actually would play in a real game, given the time situation, is queen takes d6. It's not a glamorous move. It's not going to win us any beauty prizes, but what I know is that it gets into an endgame where we are up a minor piece and white has no clear attack against our king anymore. And clearly, I think this move was missed by our opponent. No, I take bishop takes b2. Why, right? Why would you need this meaningless pawn and give white a tempo for an attack? I'm sure the engine would probably claim that black is still winning after bishop takes b2. Maybe even we could drop our bishop back to g7. That's a move that wasn't on my radar at all, but probably should have been. Bishop g7. Just simple. Bring the bishop back, keep an important defender, and just ask white what on earth you have. And the answer is basically nothing. But queen takes d6 is, really the simplifying move. White has to take because queen g4 check here is completely innocuous. We just go knight g6 and the attack is over. Bishop takes e5. We play queen takes e5. We're 2 minor pieces up. So nothing to think about here for our opponent. I don't know what he's going on about here. But queen d6, bishop d6 is pinning our knight. So how should we defend against this pin? How should we defend against this pin? And there is a very important tactical detail that I calculated, which I haven't told you guys about yet. So how should we play this? Well, the move is self-evident, right? We want to not just defend the knight, but we also want to solve the underlying problem of the pin. So rook f to e8 is basically automatic. Now, in such situations, and we encountered a very similar position, yeah, that is the move that I saw. I had to see this move when I was calculating queen takes d6. We did something very similar in a speedrun game a couple games ago. I'll show you after the game. Bishop a4 is scary because it hits the rook. We can't move the rook because we drop the knight on e7. So you might say, well, then I have to block on c6. But if we play knight ec6, well, you can see how awkward that is. And maybe white has the move b4. But instead, we have a tactic. And how do you find this tactic? Well, what is the drawback of the move bishop a4? Does it actually release white's control over anything? Yes. There's the c4 pawn. And you should see the possibility of knight takes c4 as an interesting possibility, even though it's hard to calculate. So knight takes c4. If white moves the bishop from d6, then we can intercept white's bishop with b5, okay? But if after knight takes c4, white takes the rook, which bishop do you take? And that's an easy question, right? Comparison should tell you that a bishop on d6 is the one that you want to take, because in that resulting position, you're attacking the rook and you're attacking the bishop on e8. White can't save both at the same time. We're going to end up in a position where we have 3 minor pieces against a rook. Now, 3 minor pieces against a queen is double-sided. 3 minor pieces against a rook in most cases is an overwhelming amount of material for the minor pieces, even in an endgame where the rooks often benefit. Even in an endgame where the rooks often benefit. Okay, so this is winning for black. Bishop takes c4 I didn't like as much. Bishop takes c4 maybe works. Actually, maybe we can squeak by with that move, but I didn't like it. And I'll show you after the game. So knight takes c4 was a critical detail missed by our opponent. Bishop takes e8, knight takes d6. And another important detail is that f7 is protected by our knight. So bishop takes f7 check would have released the bishop from our clutches, but we just take it with our knight. In fact, I would do that with white. I think that's the only way that he can get, a pawn for the piece. But then we have 3 minor pieces for a rook and 2 pawns, which is not over, right? The game is not over there. We would have to demonstrate some technique, but I think black is winning. What if bishop b4? Well, then b5. Toxic opinions? Then b5. Bishop b4, we play b5. And we're chilling. And that's, of course, something that you have to see also, which is that when you eliminate the pawn, and you should ask yourself that question, whenever you eliminate a pawn or a piece, what was that pawn or piece actually doing? What was it controlling? And when you ask yourself that question, sometimes you discover that, well, certain pawn breaks or certain moves are now possible in the absence of that pawn or piece. Okay, so it's just something that you always want to get into the habit of doing, particularly if it's an important pawn or piece. One that's in the center, one that's controlling a lot of squares. What new resources are possible? Then anybody should be able to see b5. Our opponent is exhausting most of his time. I don't know what for. I mean, bishop e8 is largely forced. What's funny is that if white moves... No, actually, bishop b4, yeah, b5, we would have to untangle our pieces there, but it would not be too difficult to do that. The power of simplification. Yeah, so bishop e8, knight d6, bishop takes f7 check, knight takes f7. Then white's going to move the rook probably up to f3. And then our next project will be to coordinate our minor pieces so that they are actually all working together and defending each other. And in that resulting position, what we would have to prevent is kind of the rook infiltration to the 7th rank. Because rooks are stronger than minor pieces when they're able to gain kind of maximum activity. Okay, bishop b4. I'm relieved to see that move. I think it's easier for black to win in this position. So now we play b5. That's a no-brainer. Intercepting the bishop. And now, next step for us is to consolidate. And consolidating, that's a word that a lot of people misunderstand. It basically just means you have a situation where your pieces are kind of scattered around the board and they're not well coordinated. Can we bring those pieces onto good squares such that they're working together, et cetera, et cetera? Now here, there's an interesting moment because you might notice that the rook is x-raying the e4 pawn. I think a lot of you are probably thinking, let's go knight c6. After knight c6, the bishop will drop back to c3. And if we take the pawn on e4, I'm a little bit apprehensive about the move rook to f3 in that position. And white tries to lift the rook up to g3, and this bishop on c3 is controlling the retreating square on h8. If black can send us, if our opponent can send us in the direction of f8, well, maybe that's a little bit scary in time pressure. So let's see if we can find anything safer. I think there is a safer option, which is not to play knight c6, but to play knight to g6. I want a bodyguard on the king side just to make sure that there's no shenanigans that are awaiting us on the g file. Does that make sense? Let's go knight g6. Rook f3. Yeah, our opponent was basically waiting to pre-move that. I guess we should have played knight to c6 because that would have won the bishop. Let's think about this for a second. If we play rook takes e4, there is the move rook f1. That's a little bit annoying, actually. That is a little bit annoying. But I think we have a winning tactic there. Yeah, I think we can play rook e4. I think we can grab this pawn. Now, what do I see when we play rook takes e4? Well, what I see, what is the rook on e4 doing? Well, again, x-rays, super important. And here you should see that the rook is x-raying the bishop. Now, what does that tell us? Well, that tells us that if we move the knight, we'll be attacking the bishop on b4. But it is scary to move the knight because it also opens up the line of fire to the f7 pawn. So we have to move the knight on such a square such that we take the sting out of the move bishop takes f7 check. Of course, we play knight e5. Of course, we play knight e5. There is a slightly scary option, though, that I missed. There must be a way out. Yeah, there is a way. There is a way for us to keep our extra piece. If our opponent does this, then I'll mention it. No, rook f7 I saw. Rook f7, we play knight f7. And basically, we're up a rook. Rook f7, knight f7. Bishop f7. King g7. Yeah, I allowed this to get complicated. This was very sloppy by me. And I think there is a way for white to make this super complicated. But this is going to take a little bit of GM magic. Yeah, no, this was... We should have just played rook d8. And again, this is the lack of prophylaxis. I was impatient. This is a very instructive mistake because I got impatient. I wasn't willing to invest exactly 2 more moves, and then there would be no threats, and we could just proceed and bring the bishop back and win the game easily. No, I had to play rook e4, and I missed this. Knight f7. We have to trade take on f7. And now we bring the king up to g7. And what I saw was that if yeah, crap. Our opponent found everything here. Okay. King h6. King h6, we have to go there. And this is where I missed the move. I calculated up to this point. I did calculate up to this point, and the only thing that I saw was bishop to d5. This is what I saw. And after bishop to d5, what we essentially can do is say, okay, we're going to lose one of our rooks, but we can connect the rooks so that if white takes the rook, we take the bishop, and then we're up a minor piece, and we're finally essentially home free. Then we're finally... I mean, it's still not that easy to convert because our bishop is terrible, but that I think we will be able to win. We also have b4. Yeah, b4 is definitely a resource to keep in mind. But this is going to get very, very dicey if white finds the right move here, which I won't mention, but not that I'm suspecting our opponent of anything of stream sniping. Obviously, 100% not. Actually, wait a second. There's a crazy idea. Oh my God. It might actually work. I need to calculate it. Wildly difficult to calculate in time pressure. There is a beautiful idea that we have. I could have played it on this move. I could have played it on this move. So the move that I'm scared of that I didn't see is bishop back to d2 check. That's the move I failed to anticipate. Bishop d2 check. I only saw bishop d5. I only saw bishop d5. And then I think we're fine. Still it's dicey. Still it's dicey in that position, but I think we'll be able to win. But the move that I missed was bishop d2 check. Why is it so scary? Because king h5 is terrifying in that position. We could get mated there. Rook f5 check. Maybe it's mate, maybe it's not, but it's scary. So after bishop d2 check, if we go back to g7, white just keeps repeating moves. Bishop d2, bishop c3. And we can't go back to f8. That's another big problem, because then we walk right into a discovered attack, and white wins all of our pieces. There is an idea. Okay. Yeah, let me think. Okay. Well, let's repeat moves once. That's not going to hurt. That's not going to hurt. It's definitely not going to hurt. Okay. I think I might have figured out a brilliant win, but it hinges on basically move for move calculation. So if I'm wrong, we're worse. Okay, I don't know what our opponent is thinking about because bishop c3 is absolutely forced. Bishop c3 is absolutely forced. And then my idea is to play knight e5, which itself is not a surprising move for people, I think. Knight e5. But after bishop d5, I think we might have a crazy resource. Let's give it a shot. Let's give it a shot. Knight e5. So knight e5 is a logical move, but it seems to fail to bishop d5. And it appears that we're losing the game there because we're losing all of our pieces after bishop d5. But there, I think I found a resource that involves identifying the x-ray against the white rook on f1 and playing what move. What do I have my eye on here? Yeah, b4, which leads to absolute chaos because now everything is hanging. Everything except the bishop on d5 is now hanging. Oh, he found rook f7. But wait a second. Rook f7 is not scary, I think, because we have to go up to... Where do we go? Wait, let me think about this. We have to go to g6, I think. King g6 is the critical move. Yeah, I saw this. King g6. And if white takes on e4... Okay, wait. There's no way this move works. Or does it? Oh my god, what is happening here? Wait a second. No, I don't think this works. Because I think we can just play bc. No, it's still complicated there. Or can we play knight f3 check? Can we play knight f3 check? gf3, rook e... Yeah, knight f3 wins. Knight f3 just wins the game. And I almost didn't see this move. It comes out of nowhere. You wouldn't think that there's like a discovery against white's king that ends the game, but there is. Well, the positive news is that we will have some very exciting analysis to do. This is going to be really fun. Yeah, knight f3 check wins. Because pawn takes f3, everybody should be able to calculate the resulting line. We play rook takes e7, white takes the rook on a8, we take the bishop on c3, and we are up a full rook in that resulting position, okay? Not a hard line to calculate. The moment, and how did I see it? Well, because I looked at the position with kind of a fresh pair of eyes. I'll tell you what I was fixated on before. The moment I took a step back and like asked myself, can I make any other observations? Like, can I see anything else interesting about this position? That's the moment I spotted that there's a connection, a standoff between the rooks. This is the importance of taking the broader perspective. I can see, according to the engine, that BC is also winning, but it's a lot less convincing. Okay, so I propose that we start... Let's start from the start, and let's be patient. I want to look at the opening first, and then we will get to the endgame pretty quickly. I won't take too long on the opening, but this is an opening-related speedrun, so I want to do at least a little bit of theoretical analysis every game. All right, so I'm going to pull up ChessBase. And Grand Prix has given me some problems. The Grand Prix attack, I think, is one of the best anti-Sicilians, along with the Alapin. And I think a lot of title players and a lot of good players just don't really study it that seriously, even though it's, you know, it is a very serious opening. It is a very serious opening. So e4, c5, knight c3, you play g6. Now, we have played this move once before. And I distinctly remember in that speedrun, we talked about a move that tries to essentially exploit the drawback of the move g6. What is a move that white has which tries to specifically capitalize on the fact that black hasn't gone knight c6? And this may seem like a very scary move, but we analyzed it and it's not bad for black. Yeah, so d4, right? And after cd, queen d4, clearly you're punished for the knight not being on c6. And we analyzed this line, knight f6. And if white plays e5, this is very important to remember. Black plays knight c6 with tempo. This is the critical resource. And black is okay here. I remember us analyzing this position. So instead of e5, white is best advised to play, knight f3 or something like that. But black is doing fine here. This is essentially a dragon-like position. This is a dragon-like position where white is slightly better according to the engine. I think Duda Carlson had this. I won't analyze this again. You can find this in the previous video where we had this line. In the game, white plays the Grand Prix attack, f4. So bishop g7, knight f3, knight c6. Here, white is at a further crossroads as far as I remember. There is bishop b5, which we've already faced. In this game, we face the old school move, which is still very, very dangerous, bishop c4. So let's see what the top guys actually do here. Let's see what the best way for black to handle this actually is, because I don't think it's the way that I played. Okay, so according to the engine, e6 and d6 are both legitimate moves. So we can go with d6 for now. And if we don't like what we see, we can take a look at e6. So d6 castles e6. Computer gives equality, tiny edge for black, which it always does in the Grand Prix attack. And white plays this very risky but very dangerous move, d4. So here we responded correctly. The move is c takes d4. White plays knight to b5. Black plays knight g to e7. And according to the engine, at least at a lower depth, The computer actually does like the move a6, but it also likes knight g7. It gives equality here. Bishop to b3 is correct. So this is theory. And castles is correct. Knight b takes d4. Knight a5 is the top move. Okay, so I can improvise on my feet. This is the top engine line with knight a5. And it, along with a couple of other lines, which the computer assigns as equal 0.00. There are still games in the database. There are still games in the database. 23 games, including some Grandmaster games after bishop e3. Now we played b6. Still games in the database. But b6 it likes a little bit less. It still gives it as equal. Okay, so I think b6 is normal. And c4 is not a novelty. It was played in 2022 by a Grandmaster, Lars Oskar Hauge, against another Grandmaster in a tournament in Iceland. It was played by two Icelandic Grandmasters. So clearly this is still preparation. And bishop a6 was played in that game. Oh my god, bishop a6 was played, and our opponent played the best move. f5 is an improvement over the move that was played in the game, which is knight to b5. This was played in the Grandmaster game. And knight b5 is a very serious mistake. It's a blunder. Can anybody tell me why knight b5 is a blunder? Our opponent, I mean, absolute kudos. He knew everything here. He knew this very, very deeply. Why is knight b5 a horrible blunder? And black responded correctly in the game. But lost the game, actually. Black lost the game, but responded correctly. It's already -2. Yeah, d5 simply. Simply d5. And this knight is in huge trouble. I mean, the c4 pawn gets undermined. In the game, white played queen e2. And here, d takes c4 was played, but that's a big mistake. Apparently, according to the engine, you're supposed to trade everything and then play de4. Trade everything and then win the pawn. And if white plays knight to g5, black has even queen to d3 is very, very strong. And obviously, this is a disaster. So this is not acceptable for white. And our opponent improving on the game. And f5 gives white a pretty big advantage, according to the engine. So bishop a6 is actually the first mistake of the game. Everything up to that point was normal. What black is supposed to do here is, in fact, go bishop to b7. And the difference is that after f5, you're supposed to go ef5, ef5, and now you justify the placement of the bishop by striking in the center with d5. This is the point of locating the bishop on b7. Now, we will check why the same thing is not as applicable with the bishop on a6. That's called the method of comparison. That's where you really get to the bottom of why the engine recommends what it does. But first, let's have a look at this very complicated position. So what moves would you play here with white? I want to see what the chat thinks white should do here. What are some moves that we should look at here from black's perspective? Yeah, bishop g5 is my instinct. Bishop g5 is my instinct because it threatens f6. That's a nasty move. I also think we should look at cd. I don't like cd. I think cd is bad for white. Yeah, it is bad for white because you take the bishop and opening up the center favors the side with the better bishops. In this case, it's black. And after a takes b3, knight takes d5. I mean, obviously, black is totally fine here. Bishop g5 and simply knight f6. And black is home free. So white doesn't want to take that pawn. That would be very short-sighted. Instead, bishop to g5 is one of the top engine moves. And black has to find an only move here. Queen up to d6. Obvious move to prevent f6. You have to prevent f6. The funny thing is if instead you try to take the bishop first, white plays f6 anyway. This is the reason you have to go queen d6. And white threatens to take both of these pieces. So apparently you have to go queen d6. Knight to b5 is not scary because black has a check on c5. Super important detail. The engine line is crazy. Queen to e1, attacking the knight again. Now black has several moves, but one of them is to take on d4. Holy smokes. Why would you give up the dark squared bishop? Who can find the right follow-up here? Like, you almost never do this in the Sicilian. The only reason you do this is if you have something incredibly concrete. If you have a specific tactic, then you take on d4. Who can spot the follow-up move? No, the follow-up has to be something specific. It can't just be rook e8. Then why did you give up your bishop? Right? It has to be something concrete. It is d takes c because the knight on d4 is undefended. The knight on d4 is undefended. because the point is, if white plays bishop e7, then you play queen takes d4 check, and then you can take the other bishop. So white has to defend this knight at all costs with rook to d1. No, this is crazy. Now you play f6. It's equal, 0.00. Bishop f4, only move. Queen d5, only move. Threatening checkmate. Rook f2, only move. Defending against mate. Take the bishop, knight e6. Line is still continuing, and it's only moves for both sides here. This is engine analysis. Queen e4, rook e2, only moves. Every other move would lead to an advantage for either side. Queen f5, knight f8, knight d5, only move. Bishop d6, knight c4, queen h4, only move. It's leading to a draw, just you wait. Takes, queen h7, and it's a perpetual check. Check, 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 because the king can't cross the e-file. This is the Sicilian, ladies and gentlemen. And this is why people are asking, why is it hard to make a course on the Sicilian or a course in general? I mean, this is the reason. Because of lines like this. This is a ridiculous engine line. And it all starts, it's normal until bishop takes d4. This is what causes the pandemonium. Now, black has alternatives here to bishop takes d4. There is the more conventional move rook ae8, although the position is no less crazy. Because here the line goes knight b5, queen c5 check, bishop e3. Now another ridiculous engine move. Knight takes f5, giving up the queen, capturing the queen, but giving up an exchange. Apparently black has full compensation for the exchange here because your bishop is a beast and because you have a pawn. cd5, you take the bishop, and then you take the pawn, and this is equal. Because the bishops are really crisscrossing the board and offer black sufficient compensation. So in a game, I would play bishop d4 because that's too sexy of a move not to play. So that is the simple reason why bishop b7 is the best move in the position. Yeah, I mean, I don't even really think I had to show this. This is basic Betty right here. But it's amazing to me that our opponent's knowledge of this opening extended past theory. Like c4, one game in the database, a recent game. So this was clearly white's preparation, and he improved on the play of a GM. So now let's understand what the difference is after bishop a6, f5. And the question that you want to ask yourself is this. What happens if black plays in exactly the same way that you would after bishop e7? That's how you get to the bottom of why a certain move is better than another one. So the question is, after ef, why can't we play the move d5? Like, what's the actual reason? So apparently, according to the engine, the reason consists in the move knight to g5. This is the refutation. Now, you might say, well, wait a second. Well, why wasn't knight g5 a thing after bishop b7? Does that process make sense? So let's look at knight g5 here, and then we'll look at it with the bishop on a6, and eventually we're going to understand what the critical difference is. If you play knight g5 here, black plays dc. So now we go back to the other line. Now we go back to the other line, and we check dc here. We check dc here. So if dc here, then white plays fg, and if black plays hg, then queen g4 leads to checkmate. Now we go back to the other line. Why is fg not good there? So knight g5, dc, fg. I hope what I'm doing actually makes sense. We're just comparing the placement of and this is the point where black has an additional resource. See, it's pretty easy if you know the process to follow. Now, who can tell me? Let's see if anybody can use logic to figure this out. What could possibly be the virtue of having the bishop on b7? What could possibly be an additional resource that solves black's problems here? Yeah, it's queen d5. It's queen d5 because the only thing you can do with that bishop is threaten checkmate. And apparently, this move allows black to throw a spanner in the works. White isn't able to attack properly because of the mate threat. If white goes here, then you go h5, deflecting the queen. If gf, you can, of course, take with the rook because the queen is hanging. And if the queen moves back, then you can just play bishop takes d4. gf7, you still play rook f7. Holy freaking smokes. And after rook f7, you again use the fact that the queen is tied down to g2, and you take all of white's pieces. You just take everything. And you're going to take a fourth minor piece on the next move, which is also hanging. And so that is the critical difference. With the bishop on a6, you don't have this resource of queen d5 here. So what you ultimately have to do is play either hg and lose after queen to g4, because this is unstoppable. Or if you take the bishop on b3, then you lose the game after queen h5. Yeah, white. This is just overwhelming attack here. h6 is forced. gf here. Oh, there's a sexy move here again. Rook f6. Threatening rook takes h6 with checkmate in 2 moves. Black has to go knight g8. And now just rook g6. This is just absolutely crushing. fg is coming, and there's too many mate threats here. And that's it. Knight g5 is the big reason that you want to play the move bishop to b7. And that's the takeaway from the opening in this game. Hope you enjoyed that little excursion into the depths of Sicilian nonsense. Now, by the way, I should point out for the sake of completeness that after the move b6, White's main move, like the most popular move, has been queen to e1, because you're trying to get the queen around to h4. But this is bad because of bishop a6. This is a bad move. And the problem, this was a game between a 2400 and a 2586. Classical game. White has to play rook f2, and then it begs the question, well, then why did you put the queen on e1 if you can't even get it to h4? And black is better after knight b3, a b3, and bishop b7. And white is experiencing serious problems with the e4 pawn. This is the game Wang against Zhao, Washington 2022. In that game, white played f5, and black responded cold-bloodedly with e5. White played bishop g5, which is an idea that we actually had in the game. Interesting. And here, black responds with h6. This is actually how the game continued. f6, hg, fg, king g7. And here, white found a sick tactic, but it doesn't work. Knight g5. E takes d4. Rook takes f7 check. And who can tell me, how should black respond to this move? What should black do? Let's see if you understand the concept of queen disease properly. This is such a common type of mistake that people make. So a lot of people's automatic reaction would be, well, I can't take the rook because I lose my queen. But you have to always put it in context. How much are you getting for the queen? Everybody forgets to ask this question. You actually do want to take the rook. And after knight e6, king g8, knight d8, rook d8, black gets a crap ton of material for the queen. You get 2 minor pieces in a rook. Yeah, white gets another pawn on a7, true, but we can shoo the rook away with knight c6. And white also has this major weakness on e4, which you can really zero in on with rook e8. Black is much better, /winning. This is how the game continued, actually. So black was able to win the game in this way. So c4 is an improvement over queen e1. And over a couple of other moves that was played in this position. I also see that queen d3 was played, but this doesn't seem all that scary. So let's get to the game. f5, we decided to play e5. The question is, where did our opponent actually end up going wrong? Our opponent ended up going wrong in this position. Knight b5 is an automatic move. And after knight b5, already black is doing all right. It's equal. But with the best move, white is plus over minus. And I saw the best move. I missed it initially. I saw it ultimately. What is the best move for white? Same idea that we just saw. Same idea that we just saw. You have to understand how vulnerable these 2 minor pieces are. And you have to set up the move f6. How do you do that? Bishop g5. Bishop g5 is best. Now, a couple of very important details. If black plays f6, then white has knight e6. So that fails. If black takes the knight, then f6 is devastating. And you might say, well, I don't get why f6 is so devastating. Like, we just won a piece. White's winning a piece back. What's the big deal? The problem isn't that white is winning the piece back. It's which piece he's winning. The problem is we cannot keep this bishop. And you should understand intuitively why without this bishop. There are some exceptions. We saw an exception. But in most cases, you cannot survive without this bishop. If you play bishop f6, I mean, look at this position. Queen d2, queen h6 is literally unstoppable. Literally. So that's lost. And you can't keep the bishop because white plays fe and wins the rook. So that's the actual reason this move is so scary. Now, black should respond here with h6 and force the bishop away. And here, White plays bishop h4, g5. And let's see if people can once again find a move that's very much in the spirit of the Grand Prix attack. This leads to a crazy line that I think you guys will really enjoy. But what's the move here? Because two pieces are hanging. So you might think it's knight takes g5 because that's what you're used to. But think for a second about what piece you want to leave on the board. Yeah, the move is bishop g5. Compare, right? When you compare this position to this position, which attacker is stronger? If you ask yourself that question, well, clearly this knight is the stronger attacker because it combines with the queen. And here black has to find an only move, which is ridiculous, impossible move. If black takes, then this is obviously checkmate. This is obviously checkmate. Rook e8, you take this pawn, you go back, this is easy. Check. And then at the end, you have mate with knight e6. This is pretty elementary patterns. Black has to find knight d5. And the logic of this move is straightforward. You're trying to eliminate the knight on g5. But why are you putting the knight on d5? Well, there's a secondary reason, which is that if white plays queen h5, then the knight is able to drop back to f6 and protect h7. That's why you don't go knight c6 or knight c8 or any other knight move. So after knight d5, white finds a counter blow. Knight d e6. Jesus. F takes e6, knight takes e6, and white just gets a huge attack. Queen f6. And now apparently after queen takes d5, it's plus over equals. It's like 0.6. Finally, the smoke clears. Black plays bishop b7 to force the queen away. Queen to d3. And white has overwhelming compensation for the piece. There's the idea of rook f3, rook g3. The knight is a monster. And at this point, white already has 3 pawns for the piece. Just mind-blowing complications with bishop g5. But this would have put us in very serious trouble. This would have put us in very serious trouble. Yeah, this is why chess is so fun. I hope I'm not going too deep. But this is how you learn about tactics, right? It's not just solving puzzles. Analyzing helps you really just get to the bottom of some of these ideas. And it's also fun. It's fun to analyze with an engine. It's also fun when you have a grandmaster like guiding you around, which is what I'm trying to do. So after e5, knight b5, now we're able to take this pawn, and now black is fine. Now black is fine. So our opponent correctly plays knight takes d6. Finally, the smoke clears, and here knight e5 is a horrible move. Our opponent is trying to play in the spirit of the Grand Prix attack, but he just doesn't have enough going on the king side to justify this knight sack. This knight sack is just terrible. The correct move is bishop f2. And according to the engine, the move that I intended to play was best, queen c7, in order to be able to play rook a d8. And here we were calculating knight g5. I was mentioning this during the game. Black has to play h6. Why does black have to play h6? Because if you procrastinate, then this is devastating. Because the mate is threatened, and now knight f7 is horrendous. So here you have to immediately root out the knight. Knight takes f7, rook f7, knight f7, king f7. What should white play here? Who can tell me, how should white proceed, continue the initiative? Otherwise, white is much worse. This is a no-brainer. This move should be automatic to you. Yeah, c5. Very nice. c5. Black takes the bishop, but the queen replaces the bishop. And the benefit of the queen on b3, once the king escapes, is that white can play cb, ab, and maybe white could grab that pawn, or white could just move the rook away. And the engine gives equality here, which I agree with. I think it's just a super complicated position that's hard to evaluate, and usually that means equal. So this is how the game should have continued, but our opponent just is unable to maintain the tension. He plays knight takes e5. And now let's get directly to the final stage of the game, because after bishop e5 and queen takes d6, black is winning. Black is winning. This is up a piece. And I just wanted to point out before we get to the final stage of the game, where you saw this before. So where you saw this before, and I just realized we played this guy once before. This is the second time we played this guy. Oh, it was the Jobava London game where I missed 94. So no wonder we got into a bad position. Here I was in trouble as well. So this guy knows what he's doing. I'm just looking for the game. Yeah, this is the game where you saw a very similar tactic. Remember that when a piece is defended by another piece, particularly if it's a rook or a queen, you can generally chase away the defender. So remember this game where we first played knight g7, and then we did the same thing with the bishop. This is exactly what our opponent did. Attack the rook, or that's exactly what we did. And if the rook has to move, then you take the knight. Now, compared to this game, we had an additional resource in this position, which is, of course, knight takes c4. And if bishop e8, then we play knight d6, and the rook is hanging, the bishop is hanging. I explained this during the game. Black is winning. So let's go to the game. Bishop b4, b5, bishop b3, knight g6, rook f3, and rook takes e4 is probably not a mistake in itself. But I think the safer move would have been just to bring another rook into the game. Just defend the f7 pawn. And white is out of ideas. White is simply out of ideas. Our next move is going to be either rook takes e4 or bishop b7. We're going to win the e4 pawn. We're going to win the game. So remember the power of prophylaxis. When you stop your opponent's threats, it's so much easier to play. I could not resist because I thought that I had calculated this accurately. And it turns out that this is a lot more complicated than I made it out to be. So what happens if white plays bishop f7? Well, this is easy. This is easy. You take the bishop, and then you take the other bishop, and you're up 2 minor pieces. But of course, our opponent finds something fancier than that. Rook takes f7. And this move is a lot scarier, because if you ignore the rook, then you lose the game to rook takes a7 check. And white will take this rook with check, and then win the bishop as well. So our hand is forced here. We have to play knight f7, rook f7, bishop f7, king g7. And now the second important moment, okay? Now in this position, white actually had another very interesting resource, which was the move rook takes f7. And in order to preserve an advantage, black has to find an only move in this position. This is a very difficult move. So if you're watching on YouTube, I highly recommend that you pause the video and try to figure out the defense here, because it's very easy to blunder here. There's a mupwa, most popular wrong answer. So the most popular wrong answer is rook takes bishop, because you might say, aha, well, what is white going to do? Well, probably white is going to try to win the most number of pieces, right? So white's going to take on a7, but I saw one step ahead. I'm going to take the bishop and I'm going to win. No, you're not. White takes the rook with check and then takes the other rook. And if you don't take the bishop and you move the king, you have to stay on the 8th rank. And the problem is that you also lose the bishop on a6 in the end. Does that make sense? So if you instead move the king to the side, this also is not going to cut it, because white's going to give you this nasty little check on c3. And yeah, you can block with knight e5, but just look at this position. This is a disaster. Everything is being lost right now. Or white could play rook e7 and pick up the knight. You're gonna lose the game here. So the correct idea is rook to c4. Cutting off, slicing off the discovered attack. This is the benefit of being up a rook. You get to give away some of your material, and here black is winning. Black is up a piece. Now, according to the engine, white preserves some practical chances with rook c7, because black's king is so bad and black's minor pieces are so bad that it's really, really hard to untangle. And here the best move is just to bring the bishop around to the center. Bishop c8 is a really strong move. And okay, black will have to demonstrate some technique, but this is winning. This is winning. Does that make sense? So instead, our opponent plays bishop f7. We have to go up. Bishop c3, king h6, and bishop d2 is the move that I missed. And according to the end, I had no idea whether we were winning or losing after king h5. Apparently, black is still better. But can you really blame me for not wanting to go for this position? I mean, this is crazy. This is crazy. Let me run Stockfish here at a high depth and give you the best line. Stockfish at a high depth. This is where the chess.com engine really is insufficient. But positions that are this complicated need to be looked at with a serious engine. So apparently, here's the evaluation. Just a second. The evaluation is an advantage. No, it's equal. Oh my God. But this is insane. This is impossible. Apparently, the best move here is not to give this check, but instead to play bishop d5. So just to make sure we're on the same page, how should black respond to this move? How should black respond to bishop d5? Just to make sure everybody understands what's going on here. Yeah, rook a8, right? Rook a8. Now there is an only move If anybody finds this move in a game, you immediately call the TD or you call Danny Wrench. Literally. Apparently the best move. There's a move that keeps equality, which is just to take and go rook f7 and win all of black's pawns. But the absolute best move is h3. h3. And the idea is to take away the g4 square from black's king. That's the idea. So if black moves the rook, then there's checkmate in 3 moves. Check, mate. That's the idea. Black's king is caught in something like a mating net here. And black can draw with king h4. And now white plays bishop e4, rook e4, rook f5. Black's king is still in serious trouble. But there's a perpetual check. King g3, check, king h4, and we have a repetition of moves. Black can't do anything else here, because if instead you play a move like bishop c8, you get checkmated. Check. And this is the secondary idea of h3. Now white has g4, and you have to give up your rook. And if you go the other way, you get checkmated. So, yeah. So it was a good call for me not to go king h5, in long story short. So I decided to apply the final idea, knight e5. And without this idea, this game would have been a draw. Because without this move, and I played correctly, apparently this is still equal, but white has to be super precise. So let me tell you what I calculated with this move, knight e5. Oh my gosh. I calculated the... Oh my... Okay, this is amazing. This is amazing. You're going to enjoy this tremendously. This is beautiful. Okay. Get ready. So, okay, first of all, let's make sure we're all on the same page. What is the point of knight e5? Well, the point is that the king has nowhere to go. Because if you go back to f8, you get massacred with bishop d5, or bishop g6, even better. We've already discussed why king h6 and king h5 doesn't work. So I figured the only other idea is to block with a knight. If you try blocking with the rook instead, this is a very ingenious idea. The problem is that white's going to take the knight first and then take the rook. Okay? So here white plays bishop d5, and everything hinges on this move b4, which thrusts the game into complete and total chaos. And here, I had to calculate a certain line that at first sight may seem to be only beneficial to white. What are the possibilities here for white? Our opponent lost the game quickly with rook f7. That was a mistake. What should white do instead? Which pieces should white take? Well, basically, white has 3 candidate moves, okay? What are white's 3 candidate moves? There's bishop takes knight, there's bishop takes rook, and there's bishop takes other rook. Bishop takes knight is really dumb because you just take. And at the end, white is down in exchange, okay? So that's ruled out. Which rook should white take? Well, white should actually take this rook. Because if you take the other rook, black's going to take the bishop. Why is black going to take the bishop? Black is not going to take the rook here because that allows bishop takes e5 check. So we're going to take the bishop. White's going to take the rook. We're going to take the rook. And at the end, the bishop on a8 is terribly placed. King takes f1, loses the game to c2. Compare that to the other capture. Bishop takes 8, same thing happens. bc, bishop e4, bishop f1, king f1. Here the bishop is optimally placed because c2 is impossible. But I saw this, and I thought that black is winning here with c takes b2. Now, how do we assess this position? Well, what does black want? Black wants to get the knight over to a3 and promote the pawn and win a piece. And it turns out that white's king is not fast enough because white plays king e2. That's not the beautiful part. All of this I saw. And look at this position. King d1, knight a3. And you're preventing the king from stopping the pawn. On the next move, black promotes to a queen, and some technique is required, but black is in fact winning here. Does that line make sense to everybody? This line. But here's the beautiful part. After king e2, knight c4, white has an only drawing move. Incredible idea. I've never seen quite this idea before. White to play and draw the game. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, I really think you should set this up and take some time on this because this is a high-level exercise. So stronger players watching, you really would want to take some time on it. Yeah, one of you got it. Well, bishop b1 doesn't help, right? Bishop b1 doesn't do anything. It just makes it worse because now I make this move with tempo. If you play bishop c2 and king d3, I'm not going to take your bishop. I'm just going to promote. But hopefully you're spotting a pattern, which is your basic... how do you solve this? Well, the basic premise, the basic idea is that in the situation after black takes on b1, the knight is essentially trapped. And if you keep calculating here, you might find that king c2 almost traps the knight. Here, the knight is able to escape, but only through b5. That's the only square that the knight is able to escape through. Otherwise, you would have to repeat moves forever. Knight b1, king c2, etc. So it's a prophylactic move that sets up the drawing mechanism. a4 is correct. a4. Knight a3. Now you walk the king over. Black promotes. You trade. And with b5 under your control, you're able to force a repetition of moves. King b3. And knight doesn't have b5. Knight has to go back to b1. Now not king b2, because then the knight escapes. King c2 to keep the knight confined. And this is a draw. And that's how I could have drawn the game. Unbelievable. So the line is, in this position, bishop a8, bc, bishop e4. This is the easy part. King e2, or a4, by the way. a4 even here is good. Doesn't matter what the order is. But you can't forget to play a4, because otherwise the knight sits on a3, and your pawn is immobilized. This is brilliant. a4, drawing move. This absolutely should be used. I'll use this in some video, because I'll eventually do a book or a Chessable course, like best moments from speedrun series, most instructive moments, and this is one of them. This is unbelievable. Knight b1, king c2. I hope you found this as beautiful as I did. So bishop a8 could have drawn the game, but instead our opponent gives this tempting check. And now the problem is that if white tries to do the same thing, right? If white plays bishop takes a8 now, well, it's not going to work anymore, because at the end of this line, what's the difference? Well, the difference is the bishop used to be on f1. Here, black is not making us be the one to take the rook with the king, with the bishop. Instead, we're taking the rook with the king, and white loses. So our opponent tried this move, but we win the game immediately with knight f3. Probably the most resilient would have been to play bishop takes e4 check and bishop takes e5. This would have kept white in the game, because here white has a pawn for the exchange, but black is still winning. Black is still winning. Not a piece. We are not winning a piece because of this check, but black should win this with technique, because the center is wide open, and the rook should prevail in this case. So this would have been the best chance for black, but for white, but still. Okay, we can't blame our opponent for collapsing with the rook e7. I almost missed knight f3 check. That's an easy move to forget about. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is this one of the most complicated games that we have played. I had a feeling that we were going to get something good, and we did. So in conclusion, g6 is a good move against knight c3 if you're an accelerated player. Then everything here was correct. We followed theory. Now, if you're a theory junkie, you can investigate e6 on your own. I'm not going to do that in this video just because I want to keep things at a normal length. The way we played was fine. Our opponent played this very dangerous modern line with d4. We responded to it correctly by developing our pieces. Bishop b3, by the way, is a nice move. And the idea is to take the sting out of the move d5. Prophylaxis. We responded correctly with knight a5 and b6. And this is still theory. This was our mistake, bishop a6. So the improvement is bishop b7. Then the improvement for our opponent would have been to play bishop g5. And then, of course, the situation remained very complicated. He gave up a piece. Here, bishop f2 would have kept an unclear position. And then, fast forward all the way to the end, the beautiful draw with bishop takes a8 after b4. Any questions? Any questions? Okay. You have said g6 and e6 is wrong. Why not now? So great question. In previous speedruns, I have claimed that in the Sicilian, you normally don't want to combine the moves g6 and e6. That is true. I have claimed that. But there is a major caveat, which is that, okay, positionally, it's quite dubious to combine g6 and e6. But normally, it all relates to whether or not your opponent can gain control of the d6 square. Okay, in this position, the d6 square is under black's control. All right? The d6 square is under black's control. But I could also show you a situation where black plays g6 and e6, and white is able to stick a queen on d6, or a knight on d6, or white is able to play e4, e5, and really clamp down on that square. That's when you want to be very careful about combining these two moves. Here's an example of a game of mine. I've shown this game many times, But I think it's the best illustration of when not to play e6 and g6. And this will hopefully give you a little context on like the difference between, you know, this game and situation where it's bad to combine these two moves. Old game of mine. I managed to win this game, but look at what happens. So my opponent plays a Smith Mora. I made the mistake of taking. At that point, I had no idea what the theory was. So I decided to play g6. And here, I decided to make a genius move and play e6. So what is the chief difference between this version and the version that we had in our game? Well, look at the fact that white has a direct line of fire to the d6 square. So he could have played queen d6 immediately, but instead he starts with knight b5, and that's it. Already d6 is under white's complete control. But instead of giving the check on d6, which a lot of people would have done, he plays queen to d6, which wins the game, because knight c7 is literally unstoppable. You can't do anything about that move. I had to play queen e7, and I ended up losing a full rook. I win this game because I ultimately end up winning the knight back, and I also grabbed this pawn in the center. So it's not that easy to convert, but you get the point. You get the point. It's all about whether the center is open. Also, you have to be very careful in a situation where white is able to play the move e5 and clamp down on the d6 square. Let me show you one more example of a very famous game. The end of this game is very famous. The beginning, not as famous, but still very instructive. We won't look at the whole game. I'll just show you the mistake that black makes early on. Okay, here it is. So this is a Petrosian Pacman game, which ends with a famous queen sacrifice. Somewhat overrated combination to end this game. But here's what Pac-Man does wrong in the opening. Not David. Ludek. So basically, here Pac-Man plays d6 and e6, which is fine, but then he forgets to play d6. Here you have to play d6. He forgets to do it, and what does Petrosian do? What does Petrosian do? How does he punish Pac-Man for not playing d6? He basically clamps down on the dark squares. Yeah, he plays e5. And it's not such a big issue. Black plays d6, but this resulting position is terrible because now black is like, black's structure is worse, and white's knight is coming to e4, and this pawn is weak, and the bishop is bad. So it would have been much, much better just to avoid all of this by playing d6. Those are a couple of examples of when, black paid the price for playing these two moves. Yeah, this was a bad game for black. And that's that. We're going to conclude here. Thank you for watching if you were on YouTube.